UFC 308 this Saturday from Abu Dhabi. In the main event for the Featherweight Championship, Topuria takes on Max Holloway. My fault for getting this video out a little bit late. Probably be out about, 7 o'clock Pacific, probably 7:30, I'm gonna be honest. But we've got a 14-fight card this Saturday from Abu Dhabi, and in the main event, Topuria defends the Featherweight Championship against Max Holloway. Co-main event, Robert Whittaker, Khamzat Chimaev. The winner seemingly has to fight for the Middleweight Championship, I would think. Danny Ige, on Murphy on the main card, as well as Magomedov, Ankalaev, and Alexander Rakic, and of course Shara Magomedov and Arman Petrosyan will kick off the main card as well. So again, 14 fights in this card, and folks, if you haven't yet though, make sure that subscribe button down below for some more UFC here on the channel, as well as a bunch of different predictions on the channel as well. We'll have our NFL predictions out later this week. We'll have our college football predictions out on Tuesday, and we'll also have our World Series predictions out as well. Currently, the Dodgers and the Mets are playing Game 6. If the Dodgers win, we'll have our Dodgers-Yankees prediction out tomorrow. If the Mets win, then of course we'll have that tomorrow as well, or tomorrow night, or on Tuesday morning. Also, be on the lookout. I think we're doing daily NBA predictions on the channel. I'm just saying, I think we're doing it daily. So be on the lookout for that. Daily NBA, daily college basketball, and that starts up in early November. Be on the lookout for that. I believe that's what we're going to be doing for the NBA and the college basketball season. That's the format we're going to have to do, so we'll figure that out when we get there. But let's now get into this 14-fight card. We start things off in the middleweight division. We have got Bruno Silva taking on Ismail Naurdiev, and it is the return to the UFC for Ismail Naurdiev, who fought in the promotion dating back to 2020. His final fight, it's a loss to Sean Brady in February of that year, losing the fight by unanimous decision. He went 2-2 in the promotion, making his debut at UFC back in 2019 on a fight night card, beating Michel Pereira by unanimous decision, then losing to Chase Rencontour on UFC 239, winning a fight after that, then losing to Sean Brady and ultimately being cut. It's kind of interesting that Naurdiev is back in the UFC, considering, he's been winning fights outside the promotion, but he's 4-3 since being cut the first time from the UFC. He's 28 years old now. His fights, he's got a win over a 7-1 fighter, lost to Jarar Hussein Al-Sawali back in 2021, which, all right, you beat Jarar Hussein Al-Sawali, but if you watch the PFL, he's one of their guys, but he just lost and got knocked out to Omar El Dwarfwi, probably butchered that, on the PFL Meta card. It's I don't think Al-Sawali's all that great. He's lost 4 of 6. Umlatov, Sadabusi, Renfro, he won a fight in Brave, then won one in PFL Mana, and then lost in PFL Mana. It's not aging that well, that loss for Naurdiev. He wins back-to-back fights in Braves, gets armbarred, gets KO'd after that, and is coming off of a guillotine choke win over a guy that he pulled off in 60 seconds, or 70 seconds. He's taking on Bruno Silva. Now, I think the game plan for Naurdiev has to be apparent in this fight. He's got to take Bruno Silva down. That's how you beat Bruno Silva. Now, Silva's a guy on a 3-fight losing streak. Now, he got eye-poked against Chris Weidman. He got literally knocked out until... it was a knockout eye poke, but then it got reversed to being a decision, but still, Silva lost. It was ridiculous. He got poked in the eye 3 times in that fight, but Weidman, hey, I won't back down. I'll stand my ground. Chris Weidman won the fight in Atlantic City, New Jersey. I don't know. That was just such an odd fight. It was one of those fights, where you're sitting in a hotel room in Cincinnati at midnight watching Chris Weidman poke a guy in the eye 3 times, and you're just looking at your parlay oh, we're screwed. It's just, I don't know. That was one of the nights of all time. And then you think, oh, okay, actually, give me Aaron Blanchfield to win in the main event, because earlier that night you get screwed because Bill Algeo loses to Kyle Nelson. So you know what? I got it. Let's go. Let's take Aaron Blanchfield by decision. Let's take Aaron Blanchfield by decision or submission. And then you lose. And then it's 1 in the morning and you're sitting in a hotel room in Cincinnati. And you're like, what am I doing with my life? Anyways, I'm not crazy, I swear. Anyways, Bruno Silva lost Chris Weidman. It was an odd fight. He was losing, but he kept getting eye poked. Weird. I lost to Shara Magomedov before that, a fight where Bruno Silva actually had to wrestle for the first time in his career. That's not obviously what he does. Now, this fight's gonna be 1 loss on the ground. It's a matter of if Ismail Naurdiev's going to take Bruno Silva down, and if he does, can he? Or if he tries to, is he actually able to do so? Because Naurdiev, that's what he did in his first UFC run. Obviously, he got out scrambled and beat on the ground by Sean Brady, but he's able to out wrestle his second second win in the UFC. I don't feel too great about Naurdiev going out there though in wrestling. Like, I think Bruno Silva is the better fighter. He's actually a dog in this fight, and we're gonna take him. Like, Ismail Naurdiev just got knocked out 2 fights ago in 2022. Given it was against a 16-1 fighter, now 17-2 fighter who lost in the Contender Series earlier this year in Vadim Kutsi. That's great and all, but Naurdiev is back in the UFC, and I get it. Silva's lost 4 to 5, but listen to the guys he's lost to: Gerald Meerschaert, Brendan Allen, Sharon Magomedov, Chris Weidman. His win is Brad Tavares. Like, he fights really good guys, and I think Bruno Silva should be able to win this one. I'm going to take Bruno Silva by first round knockout. Personally, guys, I think this is a levels fight. I get it. Naurdiev is 7 years younger. He's, probably got the way brighter future, but I'm going to take Bruno Silva to win this one. Again, Naurdiev has not been great outside the UFC. He's 4-3 outside the promotion. Sure, he went 2-2 in the UFC, and 1 loss to a top 8 guy in Sean Brady, but I'm taking Bruno Silva. I'm gonna take, again, he hasn't won recently, but I'm gonna take the consistency out of Silva. I know his striking's gonna be there, and as long as he doesn't get eye poked a million times, I think we should be fine. Give me Bruno Silva to win the fight. I don't think Naurdiev's going to be able to effectively get him down, or at least continue to take him down. I think Silva's able to win the striking affairs, and give me Bruno Silva to win the fight by first round knockout. Let's move on to the light heavyweight division. We have got Ibo Aslan taking on Rafael Cerqueira. The Brazilian is making his UFC debut, and I honestly don't understand the signing. Aslan, obviously the Turkish fighter, is coming off his first win in the UFC, where he beat Anton Turkalagi, the Pleasure Man. Another one of those fights that was in Atlantic City, New Jersey. For Aslan, he's getting Rafael Cerqueira here, who's 11-0. He's 34 years old. He's 6'4" at light heavyweight, but he didn't fight on the Contender Series. He was booked 3 times on the September 10th card, and the UFC said, you know what? We're just going to sign you after booking you against Uran Sablitiev, against Patrick Grabowski, and Francisco Mezo. They're like, you know what? We're just going to sign you because none of these fights are going to actually go down. The thing with Cerqueira is, guys, look at the guys he's beat. 6-3 Rodrigo Arujau, 1-1 Ivleson Diaz, 4-1 Jonathan Azevedo, 0-1 Gutumbre Souza. Like, he's not fighting good fighters. I don't know why he's in the UFC. Ibo Aslan, sure, he was kind of the same way going into the promotion, in all fairness, right? He won his rematch with Anton Turkalagi. They fought in Brave back in 2020, and then he beat him again, obviously, in the rematch in 2024 in the UFC. And sure, he had not beaten anybody coming into the UFC. He beat, Paulo Renato Jr. by first round knockout in the Contender Series. But other than that, right, like, Aslan hadn't beat anybody good. Which is fine, but it's kind of the same thing, right? Like, again, Aslan was kind of an unknown going into the UFC. I think the Lion, Rafael Cerqueira, is the same exact way, and it's kind of weird on the odds here. I know Aslan is still kind of a question mark, considering his only win is the Pleasure Man, Anton Turkalagi, but he's a -125 favorite. I really like this line a lot. If you want some juice here, give me Ibo Aslan by knockout. I think he gets it, right? I mean, you saw his fight with Anton Turkalagi. He was able to go out there. He's able to effectively strike with the guy. The Pleasure Man was not able to take him down. He's able to stop takedowns. The Pleasure Man went 0 for 8 on takedowns in that fight. And sure, Rafael Cerqueira is going to be one of these fighters that's just going to bring it to the last Ottoman. Ibo Aslan, kind of, not really what Turkalagi did, or Turkulaj, however you want to say his name. But despite that, again, it's kind of the fight that Ibo Aslan wants. And I think Aslan should be fine in this one. I think he should be able to win by first round knockout. I like the skills out of him. I mean, I think they're kind of like, these two guys are kind of the same fighter. Personally, that's kind of how they look. In terms of like striking wise, like they kind of look the same. I just think Aslan's the better of the two. I think he's got more power. We've seen him go out there and win in the UFC before. We saw him in the Contender Series, compared to a guy that I don't even know if he would have won in the Contender if he actually had a fight over there. So we're going to take the proven guy. We're going to go with Ibo Aslan coming out of Turkey to win this fight in his second in the UFC. We go on now to the welterweight division. It is the UFC debut of Carlos Leal. I've been calling for Carlos Leal to be in the UFC for quite a bit now. I don't remember entirely, I'll be honest with you, what videos I've called for Carlos Leal to be in the UFC, but like, trust me, I've said it before, Carlos Leal should be in the UFC. He's one of these guys who, was in the PFL season, but sure, he never won the PFL championship, but he was just always a guy who's, I think he's like, 28 years old. He's 21-5. He's fought some good guys. He's 30, but still, like, he's a guy that should be in the UFC, right? He didn't win the PFL championship, but then he went over to UAE Warriors, won a fight, and then went to LFA, won a fight in the first round as well, and now he's in the UFC. It's great. I'm super glad he's in the promotion, right? He comes into the PFL in 2022 off the Challenger Series, wins back-to-back fights, beats Ray Cooper III, loses to Sada Boussi in the playoffs, but then comes back in 2023, beats David Zawada, beats Delano Taylor, and loses again to Sada Boussi in the playoffs. His only 2 losses in the last, gosh, 10 years are Sadabusi. And Sadabusi, Swedish Denzel is not that bad, right? Former PFL champion, obviously, in 2022 when Sadabu beat Carlos Leal. Sadabu ended up winning the world championship. In 2023, Sadabu beat Leal, and then Sadabu lost to Magomed Karamov. Regardless of that, I think it's a great addition to the UFC, Carlos Leal. The problem is, this is an extremely tough out for him. On short notice, taking on Hernat Fakhretdinov, who's supposed to take on Nursultan Ruzboyev on this card. This is just rough. I'm going to be honest with you. I like Carlos Leal a lot. I'm glad the guy's in the UFC. But how does he beat Hernat Fakhretdinov? I get it. Fakhretdinov had his rough outing when he had the draw to Eliseo Zaleski dos Santos, but he came back and honestly didn't look great in the Nicolas Dalby fight either. But this is kind of the fight for Fakhretdinov to get back on track. At least, again, the guy still hasn't lost in the UFC, but the win over Brian Battle's aging extremely well. The Kevin Lee win, it is what it is, right? Lee's coming off a win where he won on some, independent, regional fight scene. But Fakhretdinov, you know what he brings, the wrestling-heavy approach. I'll be honest with you, it's not the most fan-pleasing style. It's just not. It's not going to be all that entertaining what Fakhretdinov does, but he's extremely effective in doing so, right? I think on full camp, I still think Fakhretdinov wins, but I do think it's an interesting element, right? Leal coming on a short notice. I think past the first round, he's cooked here, just because, again, Fakhretdinov's only going to get better. He's only going to, be able to see more opportunities with his wrestling. In terms of Carlos Leal, right, this is a guy who's got heavy hands. We've seen him go in there in the PFL before, right, and win fights by knockout. You go back to his win over David Zawada and Delano Taylor. Hell, he had 11 points going into the postseason in 2023. Of course, ended up losing to Sadabusi. I think he was, Leal was the 2 seed, Sadabu was the 3 seed, if I'm not mistaken, right? Because Magomed Karamov would have been 1 who fought Solomon Renfro that year. Right, like Leal can get finishes. The problem is, again, he's not fighting Delano Taylor anymore. He's not fighting David Zawada. He's fighting a wrestling-heavy Russian in Hernat Fakhretdinov, who's gonna put the pedal to the metal the entire fight. And the thing is, again, this is a guy who went out there and just completely drowned out Brian Battle, and look how good Brian Battle is now. I think this is a Hernat Fakhretdinov victory. I'm glad Carlos Leal's in the UFC. He'll be around for a while, I do think, and I think he's gonna be one of these guys who I hope doesn't just fall out and end up being an Apex guy, because he's better than an Apex guy. But even if he does have to go find the Apex, right, he'll go win by first round knockout, be like, oh my goodness, who is this guy? He'll go beat, give me a low-level welterweight. Like, Fakhretdinov is borderline top 15. That's why I think it's bad that this is Leal's first fight. Give me a low-level welterweight in the UFC who's coming off a loss. Real quickly, let me find one. Jared Gooden's not a bad shout. Let's see, who else is... Oh, yeah, actually, no. Gabe Green's not a bad shout either. Yeah, he'll go into the Apex, he'll fight Gabe Green, he'll knock him out in the first round, and never be like, oh my goodness, look at this guy. He can win, he's got power. Where did he come from? And we're going to be back here telling you I told you so, right? It's just a matter of, again, he's in a very rough situation getting Hernat Fakhretdinov. Leal's going to be fine, but this fight, unfortunately, is not going to be fine. Fakhretdinov's just going to out-wrestle him. It's like when Jordan Vucenic made his debut in the UFC. Like, again, Vucenic hasn't fought since, but it's one of these guys where, like, you think Vucenic is going to be fine. Give me Leal, though, to go out here and put on a good performance, but ultimately lose to Hernat Fakhretdinov. Next up, we go on to the bantamweight division with Farid Basharat taking on Victor Hugo. Basharat obviously undefeated and a huge favorite in this fight. I mean, for good reason, right? Hugo's a guy who's, 1-0 in the UFC, coming off a win over Pedro Facalo by unanimous decision earlier this year. I'll be honest with you, I completely forgot that fight happened. I'll be honest with you, I remember Victor Hugo in the UFC. I didn't remember who the hell he beat. But he gets Farid Basharat in this fight. Ultimately, guys, whatever Victor Hugo does, he's a good striker. He can kind of grapple, but ultimately, he's in for a rough night against Farid Basharat. Because, again, the Basharat bros, they just kind of drown you out. And I think, again, Farid Basharat's the better one of the two. He's fought way better guys. Well, again, different weight classes, but still, Farid Basharat's fought some good fighters. Damone Blackshear in his UFC debut, he beats Cleison Rodriguez. He submits with an arm triangle the first round. He beats Taylor Lapelouse, who's pretty good as well. The thing is, we just haven't seen Farid Basharat since January of this year. And again, a lot changes since January, but still... Basharat's going to be Farid Basharat in this fight. He's going to take down Victor Hugo. He's going to put him on his back, and he's just going to give him a long night. Pause. But still, it's just going to be rough sledding for Hugo. I mean, yeah, again, if Hugo can keep the fight standing, if he can, force Farid Basharat to strike with him, maybe he'll have a chance. The problem is, again, I don't think all of that is going to go Victor Hugo's way. There's so much in this fight that needs to go Victor Hugo's way in order for him to win this fight. He has to stuff takedowns. He has to, what the Basharats do well, and Farid Basharat as well. There's a lot of as wells in that sentence, but they're always in the front foot. They're always pushing forward. They're always backing you up, and that's what sets up opportunities for them to get takedowns. And ultimately, again, that's where Basharat's going to want you to be because they're so good on the ground. They're so controlling on the ground, too. And they're, the Basharats, get Farid included, one of these guys that if they miss the first time, they don't get it the second time, they're going to keep shooting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They're going to keep shooting the entire fight. Again, that's why this is going to be so rough for Victor Hugo. He has not fought anybody on the level of Farid Basharat yet in his career. He had a good, extensive resume outside the UFC. He fought some really good guys. Beat a 16-1 Eduardo Torres by knee bar in the Contender Series. That's great. But again, you're taking on a wrestler with high volume who's got good conditioning and is just an all-pressure type guy. It's just a rough fight for Victor Hugo. The nickname is Striker. He wants to strike, unfortunately for him. Ferocious Farid Basharat is going to be on the gas pedal the entire fight trying to get takedowns. And ultimately, that's where I think Victor Hugo loses. I think he ends up on his back, and I think Farid Basharat is able to effectively shoot, and shoot some more in this fight. Give me Farid Basharat to win the fight. Give me the Afghani to win the fight by unanimous decision. We go on to the next one here. In the heavyweight division, my goodness, what a fight. What a damn fight. We've got Kennedy and Nzechukwu taking on Chris Barnett. Now, I picked Chris Barnett to beat Justin Tafa a couple weeks. Obviously, the fight got, bumped because Barnett was stuck in the hurricane over there in the southeast. I'm glad he's all right. I'm glad he's back. I still don't mind that pick of Nzechukwu beating, not Justin Tafa, Junior Tafa. Because Junior Tafa, even though I thought he was going to win his replacement fight, he looked horrible in the victory. Now you get Nzechukwu versus Chris Barnett, right? Okay, guys, the height discrepancy in this fight. Chris Barnett is 5'9". Kennedy Nzechukwu is 6'5". What the hell is this fight going to look like? Now, I think Chris Barnett has a striker's chance in this fight. Nzechukwu's chin has always kind of concerned me, and it concerns me more with it being at 265 pounds. I was a little scared from fighting Justin Tafa. Ultimately, I was going to pick him to beat Justin Tafa just because the Tafas, they're tuned down versions of Mark Hunt, right? Like, they hit very hard, but just they're not great. They're slow, they're very easy to time, and good strikers are going to beat up on the Tafas. I don't know if Nzechukwu's that great striker, but I thought he was going to be good enough to just keep his range and just really just jab up Justin Tafa all day long. And ultimately, that's kind of what he has to do against Chris Barnett as well. If Nzechukwu can just maintain distance and control the octagon in this fight, there's no chance in hell he loses. He has a 9-inch reach advantage in this fight, and it's going to be his fight to lose against, again, a guy in Barnett who's taking the fight on short notice. And Nzechukwu, it is his first one at 265 pounds, but I don't know if he's quicker. Barnett is pretty quick at 265 in all fairness. But as long as Nzechukwu just keeps his distance, I don't know how Chris Barnett finds ways to get inside in this fight. I really favor the African Savage, Kennedy Nzechukwu, to win this one. Again, I don't see a world where Chris Barnett wins this fight. I thought he had a chance to beat Junior Tafa, because Junior Tafa, simply put, guys, is just not that skilled. And Nzechukwu, his chin's not great. He had a fight against Ovince St. Preux where he looked god-awful that he somehow lost to a 40-year-old OSP. Don't get me started. But he's still got skill, and he isn't just one of those heavyweights like Junior Tafa who relies on, all right, I'm going to swing big, and I'm going to hope I can knock you out. No, Nzechukwu is going to, and this is why ultimately Nzechukwu is going to have a lot of success at 265 pounds. The only thing that's going to stop Nzechukwu from being really good at heavyweight is his chin. But again, I don't know why more light heavyweights don't do this. I'm looking at you, Johnny Walker, fighting Bogdan Guskov next year. Go to heavyweight. There's a lot of fat heavyweights who suck, who you can just, if you're the better athlete, you'll likely beat. I'm just saying. Also, guys, Nzechukwu can wrestle. I think, again, it's not a fan-pleasing style, but go in there and just out-wrestle these guys, because a lot of them are not great. Hell, Waldo Cortez Acosta did it when he beat Robles de Spain. That was supposed to be Cortez Acosta versus Chris Barnett. This is how these heavyweights, this is why Andrei Arlovsky saw so much success for the longest time, too. They're just better athletes than some of these guys. They're not just fat heavyweights who just rely on their power. I'm sorry, that's just what it is. I like Chris Barnett. I really do. This is not a shot at Chris Barnett. This is a shot at, I'm sorry. I really am. I'm sorry, Josh Parisian. This is a shot at you. One of those guys, like Parisian, Roque Martinez, these guys who just, swing big. I know Martinez hasn't been in the UFC in 3 years, but I mention him all the time just because what an all-time heavyweight he was. Shout out the Apex in 2020. If you weren't there, you're not a true fan like I am. Like I am watching the Apex, on one screen while Georgia, Texas is on the other. No, I'm still watching the Apex, Way to go, Dana White. Yeah, like, okay, I've spent too much time on this heavyweight fight, but like, again, I think Nzechukwu is gonna see some success just because a lot of these heavyweights just aren't that skilled. And Nzechukwu is kind of skilled, and he's got a big reach. He should stay at heavyweight, and he should see a lot of success at heavyweight. I think he picks apart Chris Barnett. Eventually, he'll break him down. I think Nzechukwu wins this fight by second round TKO. Again, that was way too much time on that lackluster heavyweight fight, but we move on to our next one, and we see our guy, Abu Magomedov. Now, again, if you don't know my little history with Abu Magomedov, it's nothing special, but I just made a short film on Abu Magomedov once upon a time. If you want to look it up on the channel, it's actually on the channel pages. It's scrolled to the very bottom. The thumbnails are much different. But anyways, a boost. Yeah, I made a special video about a boost. I did one about a boost, Dricus Duplessis, and then like 300 people watched the Tom Aspinall video. It's fine. I guess just that wasn't my thing on YouTube. But anyways, I know a lot about Abu Magomedov, right? This is a guy who was born in Dagestan, moved when he was about 13, 14 to Dusseldorf, Germany. So that's why he has, again, he's a Dagestani, but he can wrestle because that's what they just grow up in over there in Dagestan. But, you know, Germany, obviously a much more kickboxing-based country, at least in combat sports, than wrestling. So that's why Abus has a combination of both. Now, this is a guy who's 2-2 in the UFC, came into the UFC, beat Dustin Stoltzfus, immediately got launched into a fight against Sean Strickland, where I believe at the time I said the winner of that fight could be fighting for a belt next, and everyone laughed at me, but look what happened. Sean Strickland won for the champion, or beat Adesanya next for the championship. Anyways, Strickland beats Abus. Abus then loses to Cairo Borjaio. He gets outstruck by Borjaio. At the time, you're thinking, oh, great, like Abus just kind of sucks. But no, Cairo Borjaio is a top 5 guy. Abu Magomedov dominates Warlley Alves in a fight he's a minus 1,200 favorite in, and now he gets Bruno Ferreira. This is a good fight because someone's getting knocked out. Bruno Ferreira is legit. He's 12-1. He's won 2 fights in a row. Phil Haas and the Dustin Stoltzfus. Again, those guys, let's just be honest, aren't great. And those are guys that Bruno Ferreira should run right through. And, you know, ultimately he has. So good for him. His best win is his first win in the UFC at 283 when he knocked out Gregory Rodriguez. That was very surprising on short notice. He went out there and did that. The loss to Nurulson Ruzboyev, he got knocked out in like 107 seconds, I believe. Is what it is. He got caught by Ruzboyev. Ruzboyev's got power. Ferreira came crashing in, didn't really respect the power of Ruzboyev, and Ruzboyev put him down. He thought Ruzboyev was just going to wrestle him the entire fight, and, you know, it is what it is. Anyways, this is an interesting fight. Because, again, Abus comes in from the PFL, right? He has a win over Sada BC. He fought in the championship fight in 2018, lost to Lewis Taylor, and then made his way in the UFC after, right? Like, I don't think Abus is that bad. I think he just ran into the wrong guys in the UFC. Bruno Ferreira swings big, but I just think Abus is the much more technically sound fighter, and I think Abus is just the better fighter, too. He's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage over Bruno Ferreira in this fight as well. I think Ferreira is going to be chasing for most of this fight, and Abus has got really good kicks. Like, again, you saw that Dustin Stoltzfus knockout, where it was literally just a front kick up the middle that literally Anderson Silva, Vitor Belfort just caught him up the middle and put him out. Like, I think we see something, I don't know, something like exactly that similar, but it's going to be something along the lines of that, right? Ferreira is going to be crashing in. Abus is going to catch him with something up the middle, and that's kind of how he wins this fight, because that's how Ferreira fights, right? Ferreira, you know, he'll throw caution to the wind, and he'll just try to go out there and knock you out. It makes for fun fights, like, given all of his fights in the UFC are crazy. He hits really hard, throw big elbows as well. I just think Magomedov's way too technical for him. And it's not like technical in the sense that he's boring. It's just that, like, again, Ferreira, he's losing in terms of reach in this one. He's going to have to crash in against Magomedov. He's going to have to try to close distance, and I think every time he does try to close distance, I think Abus gets the better of him. If the fight goes down to the ground, I like Abus as well, just because Ferreira's ground game doesn't impress me that much either. I don't really anticipate it to. I think you see mostly kickboxing fight. Like, Magomedov, you know, he is a good defensive wrestler as well, so, like, I don't think Ferreira's going to shoot on him, but if he does, like, Abus is going to be able to dictate where each fight goes, and he relies on his kickboxing, and he trusts in his kickboxing, which is good for him. So that's, again, ultimately, that's where Abus wants fights. He trusts his defensive wrestling, so he thinks, again, he can beat everyone kickboxing. I think, personally, he beats Bruno Ferreira kickboxing. Again, Ferreira's got power. That's great. But, again, technically skilled-wise, Abus has got way many more skills. Like, yeah, he has his moments where he gets caught. Look at the Lewis Taylor fight where he got knocked out in 33 seconds for $1 million in December 2018. Again, it will happen to him. But I think he's learned his lesson. Again, Sean Strickland, Abus does tire as fights go on, but look at Bruno Ferreira. That guy's not equipped to go 3 rounds either. Like, we haven't seen it yet in the UFC, so who knows? Don't think this fight really gets out of the first round. Ferreira has only been out of a first round twice in his entire professional mixed martial arts career, and he's never been in the 3rd round. If anything, shocking, Abu Magomedov will have a cardio and a stamina advantage in this fight. if he just fights this fight technically sound, he's going to win. He's not going to blow everything like he did in the Strickland fight where he was, just went for it, won the first round, ultimately had nothing to do in the second round because he was just gassed. I think we're fine picking Abus Magomedov in this fight. He should be able to beat Bruno Ferreira. I think he catches him with something late in the first round. Again, Ferreira, I can't emphasize this enough. He's going to be crashing in a lot in this fight, and Abus should be able to hit him with something up the middle. That's kind of where I anticipate this being. Because again, Ferreira does get hit. He's just been able to outlast these guys. And like Stulf Seuss and Phil Hawes, come on. But Rodriguez win, I'll give him that. But ultimately, I think Abus is the better fighter. Next up, we go to the bantamweight division. We have got Said Nurmagomedov taking on Daniel Santos in this one. Nurmagomedov, obviously a huge favorite. Last name, sure, but still, Nurmagomedov's pretty solid. I'll give him credit for that. Said is good. His only losses are Jonathan Martinez, who's a really tough guy. Who lost to Jose Aldo, who got robbed against Mario Bautista, but it's fine. And then Raoni Barcelos back in 2019 in Busan, South Korea. For his opponent, Daniel Santos, this is a guy, again, he's, he wants to be Charles Oliveira, right? Shoot the Bucks. But for Daniel Santos, right, a loss to Julio Arce in his UFC debut, a win over John Castaneda after that, and then a win over Johnny Munoz after that as well. We just don't see Daniel Santos ever. He's had 3 fights in the UFC. I would like to see this guy way more active, especially at the bantamweight division. And at 29 years old, dude, this is when you're supposed to be getting fights, right? He's supposed to fight Daniel Marcos last year in Brazil. He withdrew from the fight, and now here he is. Again, I would just like to see Daniel Santos fight a little bit more. I think he's outgunned in this matchup, obviously. I think this is the UFC's, kind of just way of saying, hey man, you're supposed to be fighting more, and now you get to fight a Nurmagomedov from Makhachkala, Russia. Good luck with this, right? Hey, it's Russia versus Brazil, right? But I think Said is the way better guy. And obviously, again, we say this every time Said fights, he's not the traditional Makhachkala, Russia product, right? He's more of a striker, like Shara. We'll get to Shara later. Obviously, I know he's not a Makhachkala guy, but we'll talk about Shara Magomedov's fight. But Said is not a traditional Dagestani, right? He throws spinning stuff. He's trying to knock you out. His ground game's good too, but he's not one of these Dagestanis or Makhachkala guys who are just going to wrestle and just kind of lay on you the entire fight. No, he's going to try to find ways to finish fights. And again, he goes the guillotine choke a lot. He got that against Cody Stamann. Jakub Karakmanov, his name's Karamov, but still, was able to take down Said a lot, but Said just locked up a guillotine choke and submitted him. The Mooney and Gafurov fight in his last one back in Abu Dhabi last year, Said Nurmagomedov caught Gafurov in a submission. And again, like Daniel Santos, Said Nurmagomedov is one of these guys we just don't see that often. He hasn't fought in a year since the last Abu Dhabi card, and here he is again. Again, the loss of Jonathan Martinez, Said was able to get takedowns, but ultimately Jonathan Martinez was able to reverse positioning, and Martinez was just able to win the battle on the fence and on the ground as well, and on the feet too. Martinez just did enough to win the fight, winning, I believe, rounds 2 and 3 in that one. I think Said should beat Daniel Santos. Daniel Santos, sure, he's looked good against Johnny Munoz and John Castaneda. I'm sorry, guys, these aren't high-level UFC names. His losses to Julio Arce, who, is 6-4 in the UFC. Not a bad UFC name, but, yeah, Said is definitely the much better fighter in this one. I think he's going to find a way to submit Daniel Santos. Give me Said Nurmagomedov to win the fight by second-round submission, and I'll go one further, second-round guillotine choke. That's kind of what Nurmagomedov goes for. He defends takedowns with his guillotine choke, and he's pretty good in doing so. Now, do I think Daniel Santos is going to shoot on him? Probably not. But I think Said Nurmagomedov is going to be in a position where he's able to be winning on the feet, and maybe in a scramble or something, he's going to find his way to a back, or again to the front choke to the guillotine, and that's ultimately how Said Nurmagomedov wins this fight. I like Said a lot in this one. I don't mind Daniel Santos as a fighter, but the lack of activity, I understand that's coming back the same way from Nurmagomedov. I completely get that, but I like Said more. I think he's got better striking. Slightly, I get Santos has power for being a 135-pounder, but still, I like what Nurmagomedov's able to do, and on the ground as well. I like Said's body of work, too, just if that fight has to go down there, and that's why, again, ultimately, we are picking Said Nurmagomedov to win the fight by submission. So give me Said Nurmagomedov to beat Daniel Santos by second-round submission. We go on to our next one, the lightweight division. This is when stuff really starts to pick up. We've got Mateusz Rebecki taking on Murtabek Orolbai in this fight. Of course, the Kyrgyzstani fighter in Orolbai is back. He's undefeated in the UFC. Had, I don't want to say rough outing in his last one. It wasn't dominant like, again, we have seen out of Orolbai. I guess he's only had 2 fights in the UFC, but Elves Brenner gave him a run for his money. And that's great. Again, you need those fights. He needs those fights going into the UFC, right? Or again, as he's improving and moving up the ranks in the UFC. That's a fight that Orolbai needed. Now he gets Mateusz Rebecki, who is coming off one of the most disappointing performances I have ever seen. It's a huge disappointing fight where he lost to Carlos Diego Ferreira. Nothing in CDF. He's a veteran of the sport. Good for Carlos Diego Ferreira. But Mateusz Rebecki completely choked that fight away. and just ran out of gas in the second and the third rounds. Won the first round pretty handedly. Second round, he's getting tired. He loses. Third round, he's not even there anymore. It was just bad. It was a real disappointing performance from Mateusz Rebecki. The thing is, the UFC has kind of, I don't know, they've given Rebecki some really favorable matchups to start his UFC run, right? He comes in the contender, wins, beats Nick Fiore, who's like one of the worst UFC fighters I've seen in a minute. Again, I'm not crapping on any fighter. Like, again, these guys are farther in the fight game than I'll ever be. I'm not even a fighter. So again, shout out to these guys, but I'm able to critique them at points. I'm just saying, Rebecki fought a bad fighter, UFC-wise, at Nick Fiore. Beat Louis Gradzabov, not a bad win at all, but then beat Roosevelt Roberts, and it's just like, all right, he's 3-0, but now he runs into Carlos Diego Ferreira. It's like William Gomez. Now, again, Rebecki was much more accomplished outside the UFC, and William Gomez William Gomez is 4-0 in the UFC, beats Joe Anderson Brito. He's 5-0. God, how is William Gomez going to get a fight in the top 15 next? Anyways, where he's going to lose, but regardless, he's going to wait a whole year until he fights in France again. But anyways, it'll be the co-main event. Anyways, Rebecki hadn't fought anybody, got a fight that he's supposed to win. He's a -450 favorite in, and then just gets fraud checked, right? Orolbai is going to beat him, okay? Orolbai, even though he was tiring at the end of his 3-round fight against Elvis Brenner, he was certainly much more there than Rebecki was. Rebecki was just on the ropes the entire third round. It was just looking, I don't want to say looking for ways to get out of there, but he was done. I mean, look at it. You saw his eye was completely shut, completely swollen at the end of that third round. Again, Carlos Diego Ferreira wins the fight with 9 seconds to go. Not like expected, but the way that fight was trending, again, that's just kind of how it was looking as the fight kept progressing. That, again, CDF is slowly starting to take over, and, he's in a very good position to win this fight. Again, I don't think Rebecki's bad, but I just think this is a rough fight for him because Orolbai is going to bring a wrestling-heavy approach to him. Diego Ferreira saw a lot of success wrestling at the end of that fight against Rebecki, and I think Orolbai is just better in terms of his wrestling than Rebecki as well. Rebecki's 32 years old. I'll be honest, he doesn't fight like he's 32. He kind of fights like he's kind of nearing the end of his prime, I think. At least that's kind of what I saw in the Diego Ferreira fight, because this is a guy that just fought so much in Poland and whatnot prior to coming into the UFC. I don't want to say he's past his prime, but it's just, I don't know. I think Orolbai's the better fighter. I think Orolbai's got better wrestling. He's much younger. He's 6 years younger than Rebecki as well. And I just think he has more skills on the ground to win this fight. And I think, again, Orolbai, for one, takes damage better and inflicts damage better as well. I'm going to take Orolbai to win the fight by taking by third round TKO. I'm going to take somewhat of a repeat of what happened in Rebecki's last fight against CDF. I think, again, Orolbai is just going to be there at the end of 15 minutes. But I think this is going to be one of the fights, though, where, Orolbai is, very certainly winning at the end of the fight. And, again, he's just wearing on Rebecki as the fight's going. And he obviously gets it done at the end of the third round. But it's one of those fights where, again, Orolbai is going to get a 30-27 decision. But it's more of just, all right, Herb Dean gets in there. It's just, all right, we've seen enough. And Orolbai goes out there and gets the win. I'm not saying it's going to be like Michel Pineda, Anthony Hernandez. But maybe it's something like that. I think Orolbai eventually just beats this guy down for 15 minutes. Give me Orolbai. I think he's good. I really want to see him tested against another top 20-ish guy. We'll see what we get next at him. Murtabek Orolbai. But give me the Kyrgyzstani fighter to win the fight by third round TKO. As we go on to our featured prelim in the welterweight division, we've got Geoff Neal taking on Rafael dos Anjos. RDA is 40. He is a man. He is 40 years old. I believe this fight will be on his 40th birthday, if I'm not mistaken, which great for RDA. Which is not great for RDA, though, is that he's running into Geoff Neal. Geoff Neal's all right. I don't even think Geoff Neal's, going to be some, world beater or whatnot. He's off 2 straight losses against Rakhmonov and Gary. It's just, I don't know what RDA really has to offer at 40 years old, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. He did stun Mateusz Gamrot in their fight. He did knock down Gamrot in the first round. That's great. He just got wrestled the rest of the fight, and just Gamrot was the much more active fighter as that fight progressed, which, again, is expected. But I don't think Gamrot's really, no one ever thought Gamrot was a true, title challenger, and then he lost to Dan Hooker. I thought he got robbed personally, but it is what it is. I think Dan Hooker's got a lot of favorable decisions recently, but, once he runs into Poirier or Gaethje or Hell McGregor, he'll probably lose. I don't think he's going to fight Conor. I don't think Conor ever fights again, because... Anyways, RDA, his only win in the last 3 years is Brian Barberena. Lost to Fiziev, beat Brian Barberena in a fight that shouldn't have happened. Lost to Vicente Luque in a main event, and then lost to Mateusz Gamrot. Geoff Neal, this is I'll tell you what this fight is. This fight's a fight to get Geoff Neal back on the win column. Does he finish RDA is the question. Like, can he go out there and get a finish of RDA? I actually don't think so. I'm going to take Jeff Neal by decision. RDA is an extremely tough guy to put away. He is 40 years old. I believe he is. Yeah, it will be his 40th birthday on Saturday when he's fighting Jeff Neal. I don't think Jeff Neal gets a finish. I mean, like, this is a guy, again, who has looked good recently. He, had a very good showing for himself when he fought Shavkat. Ultimately lost, but looked good in the Shavkat fight. The Ian Gary fight, he was just very hesitant that entire fight. It is what it is. Ian Gary's a technical fighter, I guess. It is what it is. He knocked out Vicente Luque back in 2022, by far Jeff Neal's best performance of his career. Beat Ponzinibbio by decision, lost to Neil Magny, lost to Wonder Boy. Wonder Boy just outclassed him back when Wonder Boy was in his prime. Oh, the good old days. I think Jeff Neal's going to beat Rafael dos Anjos. I don't think RDA is going to be able to take him down. Jeff Neal doesn't really get taken down. I think the only guy to ever take him down in the UFC is actually Neil Magny. I think he's the only guy to ever take Jeff Neal down, or at least like hold Jeff Neal down. I don't think RDA is able to do that. I understand RDA's got a really good wrestling game, but I just think he's going to be eaten alive on the feet in this one. Just because, again, it's RDA at 40 years old. I don't think RDA is necessarily bad. It's just he's going back up, which I know that's kind of what he has to do because he doesn't want to call that weight again to make 155, which I understand. But you're going up to 170 to take on a guy who hits hard in Jeff Neal. And this guy who's he's a good striker. Jeff Neal's a good striker. Give me Forrest MMA zone, Jeff Neal to win this fight. I like him to take it by unanimous decision. I think RDA will have his moments because, again, I think his best pathway to victory is going to be on the ground in this fight. I think he's going to have to result in some wrestling, and I think he will get a takedown maybe at some point in this fight. Maybe he'll just be holding Jeff Neal up against the fence and kind of just winning minutes of control. But other than that, like, Jeff Neal is the better fighter. He is well more equipped to win this one. So give me hands of steel, Jeff Neal to go out there and beat Rafael dos Anjos, and I think he gets it done by unanimous decision. So give me Neal to win this fight. What's next for RDA? I don't know. It's 3 straight losses, and he's 40. I don't know. I don't think he gets finished though. I actually think he's able to stay in this fight. I think he's able to just scramble when he needs to, and just kind of make it competitive in points. But there's gonna be no controversy on who wins the fight when the final scorecards are read by Bruce Buffer. Let's go on to the main card here. We go to the middleweight division. Shara Magomedov taking on Arman Petrosyan. Yeah, Shara Magomedov's winning this fight. Why are they giving him a guy coming off a loss? And I'm not going to like pretend like I don't know who Arman Petrosyan is. I know who Arman Petrosyan is. I'm not going to pretend like, oh, it's just this guy they're giving him. Like, Petrosyan 2 fights ago beat Christian Leroy Duncan. It was a great win for him. He beat him by decision back in 2023. It's a fight that no one expected Petrosyan to go out there and win. And I think, again, it's one of these fights that, all right, Petrosyan can strike. It's going to give Shara somewhat of a challenge, but ultimately Shara should win. I feel like it's a step down from Michal Zolciak. I don't think anyone's really denying that. It's just, I don't know. I think Michal Zolciak would beat Arman Petrosyan. Now they're giving Shara Arman Petrosyan. Petrosyan's a guy who takes damage pretty well. Doesn't really get finished. Only time he's ever been knocked out was back in 2021. Prior to fighting on the Contender Series, he lost and then fought in the Contender Series right after. His losses in the UFC are only to grapplers, Caio Borralho and Rodolfo Vieira, 2 guys who just kind of, Rodolfo submitted him in the first round, but Caio kind of just laid on him the entire fight. Didn't really do much damage. Caio does one, I think it was Caio's second fight in the UFC. Just went in that fight, just kind of laid on Petrosyan for 15 minutes and got the job done. Again, Caio is much more entertaining than he was back then in 2022. But Shara should beat Arman Petrosyan. Like, Petrosyan's wins are Christian Leroy Duncan, which is a good one, I'll give him that. But then AJ Dobson, Gregory Rodriguez in a fight that, maybe Rodriguez won. Shara should win the fight. He's the much better striker. Petrosyan doesn't really wrestle. The way to beat Shara Magomedov is to wrestle him. Arman Petrosyan doesn't do that. Shara will lose when he will lose when he fights a good wrestler. The UFC, they're never going to do this because obviously why would they? If he ever fought, like, I don't know, Roman Dolidze, that's a nightmare matchup. Dolidze would not give a damn about his striking. He'd walk right in there and take him down, just beat him up. Like how Bruno Silva was able to take down Shara Magomedov, and Bruno Silva saw a varied level of success on the ground. Again, Arman Petrosyan doesn't wrestle anybody. It's like, and I said this the same thing last week I did about Robles Despain and Austin Lane. I was like, oh, well, Austin Lane doesn't wrestle anybody. You should get a striking fight with Despain. Well, guys, I don't think Despain's as good as we thought he was. He was just beating cans, and he beat Josh Parisian. And, look at him now. He'll get one more fight in the UFC. I hope they book him against, I hope they do the rematch with him and Josh Parisian. That's what I want them to do him and, give me him and Junior Tafa. I actually want that fight next. Yeah. Give me Despain and Junior Tafa. I'd low-key pop for that fight. But this one is just like, Petrosyan's not going to wrestle. Shara is going to be able to outstrike him. And even if Petrosyan does wrestle, okay, Shara's defensive wrestling is not that bad to the point where Arman Petrosyan, a guy who's just a kickboxer, just outgrapples him. And you'd think, oh, Petrosyan's from Armenia. He should be able to wrestle now. He just does not what he does, really. He's a striker. He's a striker that's not really going to wow you, but he'll, again, if you give him a firefight like Leroy Duncan, he'll win. But I just think Shara is technically better. I think Shara has more power as well, and Magomedov should easily win this fight against Arman Petrosyan. Again, Magomedov is beatable. Ozil Shashek saw success against him. Even Antonio Tricoli saw success against him. But again, until he fights one of these upper echelon guys, Shara should be able to dust up the guys within like the 30 to 17-ish, 30 to 20-ish range in the weight class. And that's ultimately where, Petrosyan is. Again, I think Ozil Shashek is a tougher fight, and Magomedov beat him by decision. I'm taking Shara Magomedov to knock out Arman Petrosyan, and we're taking him to do it in the second round. Let's move on to our next one in the light heavyweight division. It's a good fight, man. It's a really good fight. Magomed Ankalaev takes on Alexander Rakic. I like this fight a lot because it's a tough out, I think, for Ankalaev. I think a lot of people are looking at this fight like, oh, Magomed is just going to run right through him, and then finally Magomed Ankalaev is going to get a shot at Pereira. No, I don't think it's that easy. I really don't think it is. Guys, Magomed Ankalaev struggled a lot with the leg kicks of Jan Blachowicz. What does Alexander Rakic do better than almost everyone in the weight class other than Alex Pereira? Leg kicks. That's how he beat the crap out of Anthony Smith, and I get it, it's Anthony Smith. But that was like Anthony Smith in 2020, where he still wasn't that bad, right? Like, Rakic just chops the legs. That's what he did against Thiago Santos in a very boring fight, but he won. And Rakic maintains distance really well, and he's tough to take down. I think I'm taking Ankalaev, but I'm kind of talking myself into taking Rakic. Just because, again, I think if anything, Rakic has the style to somewhat beat Magomed Ankalaev. Rakic's losses are Prochazka. Okay, the fight that he was winning until he got knocked out. Great. Again, Prochazka was slowly starting to take over that fight at UFC 300, but still. And then Jan Blachowicz, he, got his leg checked and broke his leg in that fight. It is what it is. He did lose to Volkan Oezdemir in a fight back in 2019. I thought Rakic won the fight. Go back and rewatch that one. I think Rakic gets it done. The win since, again, Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos. Again, Rakic, I think, has the style to beat Magomed Ankalaev. My thing is just, can he capitalize on that? I don't know. He fought in April. That's enough time for the chin to recover, so I'm not really concerned about that. Again, Magomed, it's a fight that he actually needs to have before Pereira. Now, is it ridiculous that they leapfrog him for Khalil Roundtree? Sure, it 100% is. Khalil Roundtree should not be fighting for the belt, even though, again, Roundtree had a very good fight against Pereira. I'll give him credit for that. It was a great fight. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Roundtree fight for the belt again someday. But they, should Roundtree have skipped Ankalaev in line? No, he shouldn't have, obviously, right? That was ridiculous that they gave Roundtree the shot over Magomed. But at the same time, this is a good fight for Ankalaev to really test where he's at and really show where he's at before fighting Alex Pereira. Because his wins are, okay, Johnny Walker? Anthony Smith? Sure, now, okay, and I get it. Khalil Roundtree's win is Anthony Smith. But now it gives him a real notable guy on his win, on his record if he beats him right now, if he beats Rakic. Now, I think there's a chance Pereira does not fight Ankalaev next. I think it's a very real possibility that we get Pereira Aspinall next if John Jones or Steven Miocic. It's going to be John Jones. If John Jones retires, which he likely will. But I think Magomed Ankalaev is going to put himself in a position to fight for the World Championship next. Something that the UFC's kind of been avoiding because nobody really gives a damn about Magomed Ankalaev. Let's just be honest with ourselves, guys. Nobody, the casual fan does not know who Magomed Ankalaev, and even the hardcore fans don't really like Magomed Ankalaev because he's one of the most boring Russian guys that we've got at the top of the weight class. He's one of the most boring Makhachev main guy, top guys that we have. Just is. Watch the Thiago Santos fight. Watch the Jan Blachowicz fight. He could have got Jan Blachowicz out there in the 5th round. He just didn't really try, and then he got a draw as a result of it. When a fight where he could have been the world champion, and now look at him. He's still chasing the belt. Again, I think Magomed Ankalaev wins the fight. I'll be honest with you. I was kind of talking myself into picking Alexander Rakic, but ultimately, I think Ankalaev, even the fight where Blachowicz had a lot of success kicking his legs, Ankalaev did recover and end up just out-wrestling the guy for the last 15 minutes of the fight. I think Ankalaev wins this fight by decision. I think Rakic actually wins the first round. I think we see Rakic does this really well. He wins the feeling out process. Now, the fight against Prochazka, there really wasn't a feeling out process, so that was different. But that's what Rakic does really well. He just wins those boring rounds. Thiago Santos fight, that's what he does. He's not the most entertaining guy at times, but hell, the Prochazka fight, he was really entertaining, so that was great. But even like the fight with Bokovic, like the first round feeling out round, yeah, Rakic still did win it. I think that's what he does here, but I think Ankalaev slowly starts to take over. I think Ankalaev looks to his wrestling, he takes Rakic down, and I just think he does enough to win the fight in the second and the third round. So give me Magomed Ankalaev to be Alexander Rakic. I think he gets it done by unanimous decision. It's going to be one of those fights, though, that he wins, and it's over, and you're looking around, you're like, do we really want to see Magomed Ankalaev fight for the belt? No, we kind of have to give it to him. I don't know, or maybe, just maybe, guys, this is my slight theory on what happens to Magomed Ankalaev. Alex Pereira fights Tom Aspinall next, and they're like, you know what, Magomed Ankalaev, you can fight on the co-main event of this card, and you can fight for an interim belt, so you get pay-per-view points for the next fight. So instead, how can we introduce to you, God, who can he fight? Jan Blachowicz #2. I'm serious. They might do that. Or Khalil Roundtree. I'm serious. Or the winner of Nikita Krylov, Azamat Murzakanov. Or hell, Volkan Oezdemir. Or Bogdan Guskov beats Johnny Walker. I'm serious. I think the UFC might do that. Just because kind of gets Magomed out the way, and it's just they're kind of hoping he loses just because he's a bad matchup for Pereira. I think Pereira probably beats him, but still, it's a bad matchup for Pereira, and just like, okay, what happens when Ankalaev's the champion? It's just like, you know, Dana already hates his champions enough. He's got Merab, he's got Bilal. What, he's gonna get Magomed Ankalaev. Like, they're gonna try to find ways to not get Ankalaev in the title fight. I think he beats Rakic. Again, I think he results to his wrestling. Sure, he can strike, but I think that's ultimately his best pathway to success. I get it, Rakic can wrestle as well. He's only been taken down, I think, like once in the UFC against Prochazka. That was kind of when Rakic was wobbled. If anyone's gonna test it, it's gonna be Magomed Ankalaev. And I think, again, ultimately, regardless of what happens in this fight, this is a great fight to see where Magomed's at. And honestly, to see where Rakic is at, too. I think it's a great fight. I actually think it is. Like, I was kind of hating on the matchup when it first got announced because Magomed wasn't fighting for the belt. But actually, you know what? Kind of like the fight because it kind of just shows us where both these guys are at right now in a division that has a dominant champion for now, but the winner of this fight should be fighting for the world championship, even though I think, again, they're going to try to make Magomed jump through another hoop by offering him an interim championship. That means nothing, but offering him an interim championship in return. So give me Magomed Ankalaev to win the fight. He'll get it done by unanimous decision. As we go on to the feature bout in the featherweight division, we have got Lerone Murphy taking on Dan Ige. So I'm old enough to remember when Dan Ige fought Diego Lopez on literal 3 hours notice, and then after the fight happened, Dan Ige said, "Get me on the sphere card. That's just what I want." And Dana was like, "All right, anything Dan Ige wants, we'll get him." And Dana says, "You know what? The best thing I can do is Abu Dhabi." Kind of messed up, just kinda, but it's okay. He's taken on a very good up-and-coming guy who's actually older than him in Lerone Murphy. Now, again, we look at Lerone Murphy like he's an up-and-coming fighter. It's just because he hasn't been given the opportunity in the upper echelon of the weight class just yet. But he's actually the older fighter in this fight with Dan Ige, which is fine. But obviously, the momentum's all building here for Lerone Murphy, even though, again, Ige took the fight on short notice against Lopez, won the third round against Lopez. But again, ultimately, yes, Lerone Murphy's the guy with the hype around him right now. And he should be favored. He's a minus 200 favorite for a good reason. Lerone Murphy does a lot of things really well. I was very impressed with the Edson Barbosa fight. He was just able to stay on the outside. Actually, not even stay on the outside. He was trading with Barbosa, and he's just winning all those exchanges. I'm impressed with Lerone Murphy. I am. He can wrestle too when he needs to as well, but I'm really impressed with the striking game of Lerone Murphy. He might not hit with the most power. His only wins in the UFC by knockout are the Ricardo Ramos win back in 2020, and then when you need Makwani Murakami, which is a nice knee, even though, again, Murakami's got no chin, but still was a very nice knockout for Lerone Murphy back in 2021 as well. He had a close fight, Gabriel Santos, that's fine. Kalibau, he beat by decision, but I was very impressed with Lerone Murphy's win over Edson Barbosa. He put some damage into Edson Barbosa in that fight, and he went in there and kickboxed with one of the greatest kickboxers that the UFC has ever seen, and did not give a damn, and went in there and just beat the crap out of Edson Jr. Barbosa. It's hard to do that, guys. It's hard to beat a very good guy like Edson Barbosa like that, and ultimately, again, that's what Lerone Murphy did. You get him and Dan Ige here. I think he's the better fighter. I think he is. Dan Ige can strike, sure. He hits hard. He's got a big overhand right that he throws. He's got a very good chin on him as well. But Lerone, I think, is more technically sound. I think Lerone Murphy just is the better all-around technical striker. Murphy's been on the winning streak again. I think it's a big step up in competition for him, but he's just better than Dan Ige. I just think he is. If he has to wrestle Dan Ige, he should be able to win too. Dan Ige has really struggled a lot with good wrestlers and good grapplers. Hell, like Diego Lopez saw some success again wrestling with Dan Ige, getting him down. That's ultimately how Lopez won moments and 1 minutes in those first couple rounds. Bryce Mitchell beat Dan Ige by wrestling him. Movsar Evloev beat Dan Ige by wrestling him. Chan Sung Jung, don't forget, that was a fight that got the Korean Zombie a world championship fight, beat Dan Ige because he out-wrestled him. I think that's kind of what Leon Murphy, I'm not saying he's going to do that, but that's always going to be in his back pocket as well. And on top of that, I like the striking game out of Leon Murphy enough for him to win this fight. I think he should have it, not in the bag, but I don't think Leon Murphy has to take too many chances to win this fight, because I think, again, he's just the better guy. He's the better fighter in this one. Danny Ige, yes, he's a hard-hitting, he throws hard. Look at the Andre Fili fight. He throws very hard. But Murphy has seen power punches before, and I cannot understate how great of a win that is. He beat Edson Barbosa in a kickboxing fight. Not many guys can do that. Usually the way of beating Barbosa is, yeah, you'll kickbox in moments, but you'll take him down. And sure, again, Leon Murphy wrestled Edson Barbosa, but he stood there and traded with him for a while. And he just, there's only, minutes at most where he was, had Barbosa back on it, flat on his back. Like, Leon Murphy won every single round in that fight, and he looked great in doing so. I like him to beat Danny Ige. He's a better striker than Danny Ige. I think as long as he doesn't get hit with a big power shot, he should be able to win the striking exchanges. And I like his wrestling too if he needs to go there. Give me Leon Murphy to stay undefeated and get this guy in the top 10, man. Leon Murphy wins the fight by unanimous decision as we go on, oh man, to the co-main event of the evening. Robert Whittaker takes on Khamzat Chimaev. Is Khamzat actually going to make it to the weigh-ins? I don't know. But it feels like this fight's actually happening now. And this card would have been so much better to have gone Volkov's on it, but that's fine. We'll save that fight till December. We've got Robert Whittaker, Khamzat Chimaev. It's a 5-round fight in the middleweight division. I'm very split on this fight. I'm very split because this is the way I see it. If the fight gets out of the second round, Robert Whittaker beats Khamzat Chimaev. And the Robert Whittaker that beat Ikram Askarov, I'll make the case beats Khamzat as well. Okay, I'm just going to say the pick right now, and I'm going to continue to build off of it. I'm taking Robert Whittaker to TKO Khamzat Chimaev, and I'm taking him to do it in the third round. Okay? I think Chimaev's in trouble past that first. I just think he is. I think he's in real trouble. Again, Whittaker, you saw the Ikram Askarov fight. He set in traps very early in the fight. He gets Ikram to bite once. Boom, he knocks him out. Again, Khamzat is a very pressure-based wrestler, and I don't have it down in my mind that he's going to take down Robert Whittaker in the first round. It is all dependent on if Robert Whittaker can get it out of that first round. Again, look how great Chimaev looked in the Usman fight in the first round. He looked great. He got a 10-8 in that first round. Awesome. But what happened in the second? Kamaru won. What happened in the third? Usman won. Usman was able to win as the fight continued, and Khamzat started to wear down and started to tire out. And that's against a guy in Kamaru Usman who took the fight on 5 days' notice, had to fly all the way from America over to Abu Dhabi, and still gave Khamzat a very tough fight. Again, Chimaev, he's still undefeated, yes, but he has not been the same guy, at least dominance-wise, since the Gilbert Burns fight. Sure, he beat Kevin Holland, but Kevin Holland knew he was losing the fight. Kevin Holland took the fight because they gave him $1 million to take the fight because he saved the card. Good for Holland, right? But Khamzat has not been the kill everybody type of guy that he was when, UFC was still in the apex and when UFC was on Fight Island. I think Whittaker beats him here. I think Khamzat will get that takedown in the first round. It's just so important that Whittaker does not get subbed in that first, or Whittaker doesn't get, just completely beaten down in that first round. Perfect world, Whittaker stuffs the takedowns in the first round, and Khamzat's a sitting duck on the feet. Could 100% happen. I just think Rob's too good for Khamzat. I think he is. I have never picked against Khamzat Chimaev. I am doing it right now. I've never picked against Khamzat since the moment he's gotten into the UFC. I think this is the time. There's so much uncertainty around Khamzat too. He's been pulling out of fights left and right. I guess it's only the Whittaker fight, but he had the Nate Diaz fight. They gifted him a victory. He couldn't even make weight. Obviously, and that's been settled now that he's at 185 pounds. But he was supposed to fight Rob in June. Obviously, he had to pull out. It looked like, maybe he's going to retire again. No, okay, he's back to fight Rob. But Rob's coming off that knockout victory over Ikram. And that only gives me more motivation to pick Robert Whittaker. In the original fight, I'm going to be honest with you, I was going to take Khamzat Chimaev. Now I'm taking Robert Whittaker. Because again, the way he was just able to run right through Ikram Askarov, and again, Askarov wasn't really trying to wrestle him, or at least up until the point of the knockout, Ikram didn't look for a takedown. That's fine, but Rob, again, just completely decimated him and knocked him out. I'm not saying he's going to do the same exact thing to Khamzat Chimaev. I'm not. I think there's a chance, again, I think there's a very good chance that Khamzat gets a takedown in the first, and then we're kind of stuck in that, again, can Robert just survive? And again, very similar to what happened to Kamaru Usman. I think that there's a definite chance something like that happens. But I'm just saying there is a world too where Robert Whittaker stuffs the takedowns in the first round, and then just runs right through Khamzat. Because again, a 5-round fight does not favor Chimaev at all. And it's a fight that Chimaev, like we're talking about with Ankalaev, Chimaev needs to have this fight before fighting for the belt. You got to have a fight against a top guy before you get Duplessis or Strickland, which are both very tough fights for Chimaev. I will make the case Duplessis is by far the toughest fight for Chimaev in the weight class. I think it's a very brutal fight for Chimaev, just because I don't think he's able to bully Duplessis at all. And ultimately, I don't think he's able to bully Whittaker as well. I think Whittaker is going to stand a very good chance in beating Khamzat Chimaev. And again, if he gets out the first round, it's a whole different fight. Because not like the Usman fight where, all right, Chimaev just has to win the second and then hold on in the third. No, he's going to have to win the second, win the third, and then hold on for 2 more rounds. Yeah. As long as Whittaker does not get finished, he wins this fight. As long as Khamzat does not submit him early, Rob wins the fight. Give me Robert Whittaker. Give me the Reaper to TKO Khamzat Chimaev, and he will get it done in the 3rd round. I am going with Robert the Reaper Whittaker to beat Chimaev. I think he stuffs the takedowns. Rob's a tough guy to take down, man. Duplessis did it. He got him in that little, the judo throw trap where he took him down. Gaslam has taken down Whittaker once. And before that, you got to go back to the Romero fights. Again, an Olympic wrestler to the last time guys were seeing that much success wrestling Robert Whittaker, and still Whittaker won both of the Romero fights with the wrestling credentials of Yoel. And that was a prime, well, no, Yoel's still old at that point, but still, Yoel's still fighting, and those fights were in 2017 and 2018, but still, right, like, Whittaker has fought good wrestlers before, and he's been able to win the fight. Khamzat, I know he's a whole other animal, but if he gets out that first round, I think Whittaker wins. Give me Robert Whittaker to TKO and knock out Khamzat Chimaev in the 3rd round. Again, Khamzat's going to break. He's going to break after that first round. If he wins by first round submission, I'd be disappointed, but ultimately wouldn't surprise me. What would surprise me the most is if Khamzat either wins a decision, which I highly doubt, or if Khamzat gets a late finish. I don't think either of those happen. I think Khamzat's window to win this fight is the first 7.5 minutes of this fight. After that goes, it's going to be all Robert Whittaker. Again, he's not fighting an Usman anymore on 5 days' notice who tried to go up a weight class really quickly and didn't get to naturally build on the weight. No, he's fighting a true 185-pounder, one of the greatest middleweights of all time, and a former champion in Robert Whittaker. This is rough sledding for Khamzat Chimaev. Give me the Reaper to win by 3rd round TKO, and we still have the main event as we go on to the Featherweight Championship fight. Ilia Topuria taking on Max Blessed Holloway. Couldn't have asked for a better fight. You could not have asked for a better fight than what we are getting in this main event. Of course, the champion Ilia Topuria coming off his knockout victory over the great Alexander Volkanovski, who looks like he will be getting the winner of this fight in Australia come February, which is great. I'm glad that Volkanovski gets his rematch. I think if he loses, it's it for Volk. But I'm glad he's going to be gifted the immediate rematch, being the greatest featherweight ever. But Topuria and Max is a great fight, man. I'm kind of scared for Holloway, though, going back down to 145 pounds. Max looked great at 155, and I get it. I know why he's going back down, because why fight Islam Makhachev, a pure Dagestani wrestler, then go down and fight a guy in Topuria who is going to offer you stylistically something that you want? Sure, Topuria might wrestle. There's a very good chance that happens in this fight, which we'll see if that does. Max has always been a pretty decently trained defensive wrestler, so I don't think Topuria, sure, he might have his moments winning with wrestling, but I don't think that's going to be something that dictates the outcome of the fight. I think, again, it'll have its, it'll swing some moments, but ultimately, I don't think the winner of this fight is going to be decided on the wrestling. It's going to be purely the boxing of who's the better boxer in this one. Now, again, Max Holloway said it before, he's the best boxer in the UFC. Ilia Topuria is good. Is he Max Holloway level of good? Now, again, I don't feel great about Max going back down. I think we've all seen the Kevin Iole interview at this point where Max Holloway looks like crap. Trying to go back down to 145 pounds, he looks really thinned out. I think again, he's cutting away from the beard. He had no goatee, and he just, I don't know, I guess the earring just made him look old as well. I don't think Max is going to look that bad come fight night. I'm not too concerned. I am a little bit, just because I think Max at 155 beats Ilia at 155. Max going back down to 145 is a little bit concerning. I think ultimately, though, it's going to be okay. The one thing is, okay, can Ilia rock him and can Ilia knock him out because of the crazy power Ilia has and Max's chin being depleted at 145 pounds. But again, Max Holloway has never been knocked out, and he's never been knocked down, even though, yeah, Gaethje did knock him down at UFC 300. He did. They just didn't rule it a knockdown. I don't know why. But Gaethje did knock down Max Holloway. But no one's able to knock, again, technically, no one's been able to knock down Max Holloway. Can Ilya, again, technically be the first? He can be. But guys, I think Max Holloway wins this fight. I've been saying this since this fight was announced. Guys, don't forget, Alexander Volkanovski, I don't know where Volk is at. I truly, I don't know what Volk is going to be for the rest of his career. I love Alexander Volkanovski. I hope the man wins the championship again. Regardless who wins between Topuria and Max Holloway, I'm going to be cheering for Alexander Volkanovski to get the world championship back, and I'm likely going to be, actually, if he's fighting Topuria again, I might not pick him, but I will be rooting heavily for Alexander Volkanovski to win his, either rematch to Topuria or his fourth fight for Max Holloway for the belt, or if he fights Diego Lopez for an interim belt. I'll be cheering for Volk to win. But Volk's chin is not what it once was, and especially Volk coming off of the knockout to Makhachev and then fighting Topuria right after 4 months later in Anaheim in February. It wasn't the best decision for Alexander Volkanovski. And Topuria knocked him out, sure, but Volk was winning the fight before the knockout. I remember watching that fight. I put a decent amount of money on Volkanovski just because, hey, it's Volkanovski. But guys, he won the first round pretty easily. I thought Volk did, and he was winning the second before the knockout as well. Before he got backed up against the fence and boom, big right hand put him away. If Ilya's not able to knock Max out, Max should be able to win a lot of the exchanges in the feet against Topuria. I think he should be able to. Max is quick, Max has good head movement, and I just think he's a better striker than Topuria. That's why I'm a little confused why Ilya's the favorite. I mean, I get it, but I just think Max is a better striker, and that's what I think dictates the winner of this fight. And that's why I'm going Max Holloway to beat Ilia Topuria. We're taking Max Holloway by decision. I just think he's better than Ilya. I don't think he's going to run circles around him. No, I think it's going to be, again, a very good title fight. I think it's going to be, again, a 48-47 fight that Holloway barely edges and gets the nod. I think it's going to come down to that fifth round that Max just does win. Just because Max has been in these type of fights before. Max has been in these grueling wars that Topuria honestly just hasn't been in yet. He hasn't been in a war. He hasn't been in a Max Holloway war just yet. Like the fights with Yair, or the fight with, fights with Volkanovski, the fight against Cater. Like, Topuria hasn't been in that fight yet. He's been in 5-round fights before. Again, the Volk fight that ended, and yeah, he went the distance against Josh Emmett, but that's Josh Emmett. It's much different fighting, again, an all-time great in Max Holloway, who's coming off an all-time great performance with that knockout against Justin Gaethje. Don't forget, again, Gaethje was winning the 4th and 5th rounds in that fight, but it's fine. Max Holloway still, I mean, hell, it was the spinning back kick that broke Gaethje's nose in the first round that just changed that fight. It just did. Yeah, Max won the first round regardless, but that's what changed everything, because Gaethje could not get going, and just Gaethje was labored because he couldn't breathe through his nose anymore. It changed the entire fight. But that, again, goes to show how good Max Holloway is, because, hell, he set that up. Big spinning back kick at the end of the first round really hurt Gaethje, and again, that's what changed that fight, and ultimately that's what set up for the knockout at the end of the fight as well. Gaethje didn't take that early in the fight. Maybe he doesn't get knocked out there. I think Max beats Ilia Topuria. I think he does. Yeah, Ilya's got power, but everyone's got power, and this isn't a Volkanovski depleted chin anymore, and Max Holloway's fought these great power punchers before, and he's been fine. He just fought Justin Gaethje, guys. My one concern, again, though, with Max Holloway is, yes, he's coming down to 145 pounds after looking great at 155 pounds, but that's my concern. That's my slight concern that he's coming back down. Other than that, I really like Max Holloway to win this one. Ilya might wrestle. Actually, he probably will wrestle. But I'm okay with Max Holloway's defensive wrestling. Yeah, Volkanovski saw a lot of success wrestling Max Holloway, but I just don't think that's the thing that's going to dictate who wins this fight. I don't think the wrestling is going to play that big of a factor. I think it will in parts, but I think Max should be able to get back up. I think he should. I understand Ilya's got a great ground game, but guys, Ilia Topuria, and Belal Muhammad has said this time in and time out as well, and Belal's not wrong about this. Ilya's trying to make himself the next Conor McGregor. He is. He copied Conor's whole thing where, hell, he took the belt from Aldo, and he took, Topuria took the belt from Volkanovski, held it up at the press conference. He is trying to become Conor McGregor. And you cannot become Conor McGregor by laying on guys and wrestling them and trying to submit them. Even though, again, I have no problem with it. That's just not what appeals the fans. And Ilya trying to become the superstar that he's trying to become, that's not what's going to do that. Ilya is trying to become a superstar by knocking out Max Holloway, and if he does, yeah, Ilya's going to be one of the biggest stars in the sport. If he knocks out Max Holloway, nobody's knocked out Max Holloway. But at the same time, I think he's going to get in love with his hands in this fight. He thinks he can knock out Max Holloway, And I think he will lose because he thinks he can knock out Max. I think Ilya is going to try to recreate the moment like he knocked out Alexander Volkanovski, where they're throwing the roses in the octagon. And like he's trying to recreate his big moment that he got in Anaheim last year. And Max just starts to pick him apart. Max stays at range. Max uses his jab. And Max just gives him a long night in the octagon. We are going with Max Blessed Holloway. We're taking the 2 underdogs in the final fights of the night. I was very close to picking Alexander Rakic as well, so it would have been 3 underdogs, but we're taking Holloway and we're taking Whittaker. We're taking the veterans and the former champions in the final 2 fights of the night. Give me Max Blessed Holloway to regain the Featherweight Championship for the 2nd time and bring on Volkanovski, the 4th fight in Australia. It would be a fitting way to conclude that rivalry in Australia. Max has lost 3 times before, but now he's coming into the 4th fight as the champ again. I think that's scenes, and I think it would be great. But again, for now, we gotta have Max Holloway beating Ilia Topuria, and I think it happens. Max puts some, puts a shutdown to Topuria's rise to the top. We will see what happens to Ilia next. I think he'll be back in the spot, and I think Ilia's gonna get another title fight in the very near future. He's a fight away if he loses to Max. A Diego Lopez fight, though, for Topuria, I do think is tough. But give me Holloway to win this fight, and then give me, hey, if we can turn around Topuria quickly for Australia, give me Topuria and Diego Lopez in the co-main event as well. Have the winners fight eventually. But yeah, give me Max Holloway to beat Ilia Topuria. And folks, thank you all for watching our UFC 308 predictions here on the channel. Make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy the video. Make sure to comment if you do disagree with any of the picks. We'll be back next week for our UFC Edmonton full card predictions with Brandon Moreno and Amir Albazi in the main event. And be sure to stay on the lookout for our NFL picks, NBA picks, and college football picks coming out to you later on the channel as well, and the World Series pick as well. Folks, thank you all for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more, and Mamba forever.